Looks like we have over 400 participants, so people are well on their way to logging in. That's good. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. I know that it's been a very busy time for everybody. I know a lot of you spent time on the phone yesterday with lots of members of our community with so much happening, and have lots of emails to get back to. But I think this is an important opportunity for us as a community to sort of take stock of where we are and talk about what this new direction means for all of us as faculty and staff. I want to begin by thanking everyone for their patience with a lot of twisting and turning. It's been important to us as a community to have the ability to actually move quickly to adapt to events. And so I want to talk a little bit about what led to our decision to move in the direction of being fully remote for the fall. Then I'll talk a little bit about what it means for us in terms of budget and operations at the college, hopefully fairly briefly, and then move into questions because I know people have lots of different questions on their minds. For those of us who have spent a lot of time on campus thinking about the fall and how we would make our plan work, I want to start off by saying I'm enormously grateful to everyone who spent time, energy, thought, research in devising what was an excellent plan in the early part of June for how we would bring our community back and work together in the fall. Annette, Dr. Goldstein, John, Amir, everyone who was part of the implementation action group and all of the working groups that were part of that team really devised plans that had the circumstances of the national landscape not changed, would have, I think, put us in a very good position. And it was kind of hard to let go of a plan that we felt was very workable. But there's some circumstances in the national scene that changed pretty dramatically over just the last 2 to 3 weeks. And I'll talk about this briefly, partly because I think many of you will be getting questions from families, from students, from people that I know that many of you have already. And so it's not a bad thing to have a sense of what the reasoning is behind this decision. Even if you feel that it's the right decision, it's good to kind of be armed with what some of the information might be. One of the things that was really integral to our thinking is the recognition that when we announced this in early June, and we were among the earlier schools to have a plan announced, things were moving in a very positive trajectory on the national landscape in terms of states opening up rather than closing, things moving in a positive direction in terms of the spread of the virus. And as things started to shift in a different direction, that had an impact on our plan in a couple of different ways. In the first and most direct way, one of the most important components of our plan has, of course, been the notion that we'd have regular testing of our students as a way of keeping a monitored situation on campus that would allow us to maintain a level of safety even as students arrived from different parts of the country and became part of the community here. And so you've heard Annette explain in other circumstances what that testing looked like. We were very secure of the partner that we worked with. We felt very good about that plan. But what we saw happening over the last couple of weeks, and I know from talking to both experts in the field and other college presidents, everyone is experiencing this crunch, and you may have even read about it. There is a real challenge in the supply chain for a lot of the materials needed for testing, and that started to have an impact on our ability to feel confident that our testing plans would work as projected. The partner that we were primarily working with let us know that they couldn't do as fast a turnaround time as initially projected, and so what might have been a 2-day would turn into more of a 5 or 7 day wait for test results, which is quite different in terms of how you can use those results for contact tracing and for monitoring. And so a lot of those things began to create some level of uncertainty. At the same time, as you know, in the state of Pennsylvania, there are a number of states that, because of the resurgences they're experiencing, are labeled sort of hot spots that you need to quarantine if you're coming here from any of those. I think it's currently 18 states. And so again, an additional complication would be the expectation that we would have to think carefully about the different places that students are coming from and quarantining them for 2 weeks before they do anything when they first get here. Those are layers of complexity added to what was an already very complicated situation. We also have been watching very carefully the progress of research about the nature of transmission and what kinds of circumstances lead to COVID transmission. And one of the things that you've probably read that has emerged over the last month is a recognition that what had previously been seen as a concern about contact with surfaces and the way in which things might be transmitted through touching things. People wanting to keep their groceries sitting outside for a while before you bring them inside so that they don't have virus on them. Those kinds of things now seem less important than thinking about the air and what aerosolized particles in the air might mean in terms of transmission. And again, that has a direct impact on our analysis of classroom space, how many people could fit in the classroom. We did an analysis of the HVAC systems in different different buildings. Some are older, some are more recent, and realized we'd have to be thinking, even more stringently about the number of people who could be moving in and out of hallways and spaces across campus. So that was certainly an important feature. And I would say the third piece, is not something that is new, but is something that became more concerning to us, which is really thinking about the realism of expecting adherence to the kind of protocols that would be necessary for our students to maintain a safe community. One of the things that we've been very rigorous about is developing a public education program that we felt would give students a sense of commitment to what it would take in order for us to succeed in this plan. And I think we felt optimistic that students who are part of a community together would behave differently from students who are just, young people on a beach in Florida or in a bar in Texas or something. But what we have seen on the campuses that have brought back cohorts of students, in some cases football teams, on a couple of campuses, fraternities, there have been groups that have come back. Those have not been successful in preventing spread and transmission of virus. And so we had to take that as a kind of data point too about, the behavior of student-aged young adults and how likely it was that we would be able to, to fully control that. So all of those things playing together really led us to feel that although you can't be certain that our plan wouldn't work. It's a good plan and it's a very plausible one. We really felt that shifted the balance of security. We felt when we weigh the positives of having students in person on campus, whether their classes are remote or their classes are in person, we really felt that the overall campus experience brings significant value to students. And we really felt that even if a large number of classes were remote, there'd be some value to having students on campus. As time went on, it became less clear that the value that they'd be getting from the highly constrained environment we'll be creating, really balanced what seemed an increased level of risk. And so, that led us to difficult discussions that involved, of course, the board, that involved FAP earlier this week. And you may have seen the significant advice they released on the subject. We talked with administrative counsel, and I think there was strong support for the decision that we made and that we announced yesterday, which is that we would unfortunately have to be fully remote for the fall semester. As you can imagine, this is a very difficult decision to make. It's not normally your job as a college president to email students and say, don't come back to campus. It's not an easy thing to sit with your board and say, we're going to be, minimizing our operations and losing additional millions of dollars in the fall. So very, very tough decisions. And I mention that not to create sympathy for me as president, but to compliment the community on the steps that we've already taken that actually put us in a good position to make this decision. I know that some people have pointed out, quite rightly over the last few weeks, that we stand in a small cohort among our schools in having made, for example, the salary reductions that we announced earlier in the spring and that have just come into play at the end of July. I know that was a difficult decision. I know has been difficult for the community. As I've said before, and we can talk more about this, I'm hopeful that if we move in a more positive direction in terms of budget, we may be able to pull back some of those reductions. But I will emphasize to you that our ability to make the decision that we made and announced yesterday is closely related to our ability to make the tough financial decisions up front that positioned us as they did. If we were trying to decide whether to go remote and it was the first time we had confronted the question of what does it mean budgetarily? Will we have to have salary cuts? Can we afford it? I know from talking to fellow presidents, it's a very hard thing to get your board to trust and believe that you can manage a loss of that magnitude without any evidence that you have a plan to do that. In this case, we developed our plan up front. We determined that we might be facing a loss of somewhere between $40 and $60 million. And this community, had the power to, and the resolution to take the steps needed to address that. And so we have positioned ourselves financially in a way that made it possible to have this discussion really entirely on the basis of what we felt was right for the community. I can say that in our cabinet discussions and in the board discussions about this tough call, it really didn't center on how much is it going to cost us, because we knew what it was going to cost us, a lot. But we knew that we were ready for that and that we could afford to make the decision that we thought was best for the health and safety of our community. And I'm very, very proud that we were able to position ourselves in a way that we could make that decision. We are currently, as you know, the only school in the Lehigh Valley and the only school in the Patriot League that has taken this step. We'll see in a couple of weeks if we remain alone in that category or if others join us. But I do feel that it is a direct result of our willingness to confront some tough decisions early on, that we were able to lay a pathway for ourselves that allowed us to see the capacity that we had to make a decision that's been very, very difficult. Another thing I'll say about the move to remote and the kinds of questions that arise is that as we think about both teaching and learning taking place in a remote environment, and also what it means to have a dramatically reduced number of students on campus, I will say that we thought about lots of different sort of versions of how you might combine those factors. As you know, a number of schools announced plans a month or so ago that involved bringing back, say, significant whole cohorts, like all seniors or all first years or first years and sophomores, lots of different combinations out there. We certainly talked about those approaches, but it's important to remember that schools that have announced those approaches, that was their plan for opening, not their plan for closing. That is, that was their best case scenario for how they could have any cohort of students on campus. It wasn't the kind of plan B that we're retreating to. We really felt that a significant reduction of density would be needed, and that if we brought back as many as 1,500 or 1,700 students, that simply wasn't a significant enough difference in the overall population to lead to the kinds of changes we were looking for. And so really our plan is predicated on the idea that most students are not here, some students are here on an exceptional basis, and that something like perhaps 20 to 30% of our students could potentially be back on campus, in the kinds of circumstances that you saw us outline in the memo. And so it's a lot of work for our staff to kind of sift through on a really case-by-case basis who has, a strong need to be back on campus. But we honestly felt that that was the best way and the most equitable way to ensure that we can serve the needs of individual students, rather than coming up with entire categories and saying, this whole group gets to come, this whole group doesn't get to come. Again, it's tougher. It means more difficult phone calls with families, because people will say, why this choice and not that choice? How come my son didn't get to go when, his friend was allowed in? So all of that is hard, but we do believe it's in the best interest of students and will allow us to serve the needs of our students as well as possible. I should note, and I'll mention that folks who are not muted should mute themselves, because as much as we enjoy everybody's pets, it could get distracting if everybody's dog is in the background. One of the things that we certainly recognize in thinking about the impact of this on families is that they'll have lots of questions for everybody, including for faculty, including for staff. One of the things we'll hope to get through in today's conversation is a lot of the details that folks have on their minds. But as we think about what it means to be able to work closely with all of these students to kind of help them through this, I'll mention that this morning a faculty member shared with me a letter that he had written to his students and noted that a number of other faculty and staff have done the same, simply reassuring them that we're here for you. We know this is tough. We know that it's not the semester you wanted, to use a phrase that we're now all hearing too much of, and that the college is here to support you and to offer the best experience we can. That's what we've been trying to convey to parents and students. As you can imagine, we've had hundreds of calls and emails. Yesterday, we set up a special phone bank, and many people here, I think some 30 people, have been involved in answering phones when they started ringing yesterday after the note went out. So it's a lot of information for people to absorb, enormous disappointment on the part of many families, a certain amount of relief on the part of other families. I think people are still processing it, but I encourage you to reach out to any college offices that you need to get information that helps you if people come to you with questions and concerns. We realize all of us are kind of on the front lines here, because all of us are the individual contact point for someone. There are students for whom a coach or a faculty member or a member of the library staff or a member of the admissions staff is the person they know best, who they might drop a note to saying, what does this really mean? And do you think I should apply for this? Or how are my classes going to work? So again, really appreciate everybody's work in helping, our entire community to get through this. When we think about what this means in terms of a sort of budget and operations, as I said, I think the good news is we've positioned ourselves pretty well for where we are. We anticipated that this was one of several scenarios that might play out. We have prepared ourselves financially for this. I feel that the steps that we've already taken, put us in a position that we might be able to weather the fall without significant, additional other actions. And one of the things that I think we recognize is that so much depends on enrollment that it really is too early to say for sure exactly what this will look like. We feel encouraged by what we've been sensing over the last couple of weeks as people were perhaps at least mulling over the possibility of this happening. We've certainly gotten some inquiries about deferrals. Greg McDonald could talk about that. We certainly had some students apply yesterday. We didn't have half of our students apply, to half of our entering class apply to defer or upper class students to take a gap year. And so, we're hopeful that we'll be able to maintain a solid enrollment, but that is very much an unknown that will have an impact on our budget. One of the first questions I know that is on the minds of many staff is how this might affect staffing for the fall. And we haven't had a chance to look, to sit down and look carefully at any of our, staffing options, but I will say we continue to hold the idea of not having any layoffs as a high priority, and we aren't currently expecting that that's something that we would need to do this fall. You can never promise that circumstances don't change, but what we're currently looking at, that's not something that that we see in the cards. I can't guarantee that we might not look at some limited additional furloughs, for some periods of time, depending on people's workloads and needs. But that is not a conversation we've had yet. That also, is very much up in the air, and I'm just being very transparent and saying I can't rule that out. But that's not something that actually we have a current plan to do. And so, recognizing that that's on many people's minds, I will say we will work as quickly as possible and as transparently as possible with both FAP and Administrative Council, to think about whether there are any additional adjustments that we need to make in order to accommodate, these financial realities. But I actually feel very comfortable with where we are, relatively speaking, because as I said, we did a lot of the hard work up front. And thinking about the other side of that, which is, what does this mean for the question that's been raised about, is there a chance that we can restore salaries and compensation? Again, I hope that still might be possible. I don't think that that what we're seeing now rules out that possibility. A lot depends on how how things play out as we head into spring as well. But one thing that we have committed to do and absolutely will do is work with FAP, the Faculty Academic Policy Committee, and its budget subcommittee to develop a plan for what our priorities would be in terms of restoring pieces of those cuts, if we're able to do that, what order people would like to see and what our highest priorities are. And also we'll talk further about the overall budget picture in terms of how we see the division of labor between operating budget cuts, including the salary cuts, and what we might draw from the endowment. Because as we've said, our current plan calls for sort of a 50-50 split. If in the end we need to take less, we can adjust those proportions on both sides. If in the end we have to take more, we could make different adjustments. All of that is a complicated discussion that we simply haven't had time to have because it hasn't been the highest priority. We've been focused on the plans that we announced yesterday, but we will put that on the agenda for FAP to discuss in the near future. And I'm hopeful that in the coming weeks, we'll be able to engage in broader community conversation on that. We've been talking about what our next stage of sort of budget communication might be, and I'll get some feedback from FAP on that and from Administrative Council. But we're thinking that either having another open meeting, maybe 2 weeks from now, to kind of do an update on where this places us, or possibly even a set of smaller meetings, either divisionally based or just kind of randomly sign up for small meetings that give people more of a chance to ask questions, because it's hard to process things in a large group of 400 to 500. We'll figure out what is the best way to give people a chance to come to an understanding of where things stand. But I want you to feel not nervous about where we are right now, because as I said, we've kind of confronted the bad news already, and so where we are right now is not, in fact, even as bad as the worst scenario that we looked at in the spring. It's not an easy thing to confront those scenarios, and I know it's hard to make difficult decisions based on what could happen. But now that we see some of those dominoes starting to fall, I think we're in a position to not be alarmed by them because we anticipated that they might, and we're prepared for that. So I feel that this leaves us in a good place. The final thing I'll say before then opening it up to questions is to say that, I know this has been an enormously difficult, anxious, and stressful time for the community. And frankly, the community has felt those stresses. You can see tension between faculty and staff, between administration and faculty, between different elements of the community, as people are recognizing that with constrained resources, it's easy to look around at other areas and say, why have they not had their budget cut as much? Or if we eliminated this, then maybe there'd be more funds left for other areas. We will have longer discussions and continued discussions about other ways in which we can look at our resources and share them across the institution in a way that meets the mission of the college. But I think that what's important in this moment is that we recognize that the challenges that we face in this environment have to do with not just the massive level of decision making that needs to take place, and the challenges of governance and figuring out who weighs in on what. It's also a very basic communication challenge based on the fact that we're all kind of stuck in our own worlds behind these glass screens and not able to have the kinds of conversations we would normally have. You know, a lot of the concerns that we've heard from both faculty and staff about flow of information and do people feel adequately informed, you know, stand in stark contrast to the sense that we all have that there's actually too much information flowing around us, and you can hardly grasp what's out there. You know, I will admit from the administration's point of view, it often feels that we do nothing but write newsletters and emails and put out statements. And yet we know that often people don't feel that they have all the information that they want, and they have lots of questions about things that we haven't been able to answer. In some cases, that's because the answers simply aren't available at a certain time. In other cases, it's because we need to think more creatively about what are the different channels of communication we can use, because we don't have the things we normally rely on at Lafayette. Normally, after a meeting, if you still have questions, you grab someone and say, could I talk to you for a couple more minutes about that? I didn't quite get what you meant when you said X, Y, or Z. Often, you know, people will run into you across the quad and ask a follow-up and say, you know, at the faculty meeting, the provost said this. Can you explain how that policy actually is going to play out? You know, all of those things normally allow us to feel a sense of both connection with each other on a human scale, but also a sense of being kind of in the know and connected to what's happening. And with all of that stripped away, you can really feel the sense of tension and distrust that emerges when people feel like maybe there's something I don't know, maybe there's a story I'm not hearing, maybe there is someone else who has more resources than I do, maybe there's a way in which this could have played out differently. You know, all of those are very natural questions that come up, I think, you know, more strongly in your mind when you just don't have the surrounding context of the sort of personal interactions that would allow you to both feel that you have an opportunity to just ask a question when you see someone, or drop them an email, or that give you a chance to just sort of hear the buzz that's happening around you and get a sense of, here's how other people feel about that. Here's what someone else said. Here's what someone who's on this committee reported happened in the committee. All of that is missing from our current environment, and we haven't done as much as we might in figuring out ways to supplement that. And so we'll be thinking carefully, and would welcome your suggestions in the coming days and weeks about what are some additional small meetings, kinds of gatherings, things we can do that allow for opportunities for, you know, more casual exchange of ideas. I know Administrative Council actually has been working on a plan that they have for bringing together, you know, some social gatherings of faculty and staff, and other ways of thinking about community building in a constructive sense. And I encourage everyone to think about that, share with us ideas you might have, because I really feel that, you know, it's been many months and our community is feeling very, very stretched. You know, you can feel that everywhere. And that has a real impact on our ability to work together constructively. You know, we need to use the structures that we have, the governance channels that are available to us that allow us to make decisions knowing that they have, you know, followed the proper protocols. But we also need to create more opportunities for informal conversation, because that's, you know, part of the structure that holds up the formal structure. You know, the formal structure standing alone doesn't adequately meet the needs that we have as a community to feel that we're working together, that we're all on the same page, that we're all working towards the same goals. Some of that gets a little bit lost in the kind of noise of just lots of memos, emails, messages, letters flying back and forth. And so anything that you can offer as a suggestion, any advice or feedback you have for us on things we could do better just in terms of communication, I think would be very, very welcome at this time. So with that as a warm-up, I know my colleagues are also ready to answer whatever questions you might have. With such a large group, we're doing this as a written Q&A. So write your questions in, and we will answer them as best we can.
I've got a question right here, a couple here from around the private off-campus and the tuition. And so the question is, can you please explain why students who are locked into off-campus apartment contracts must pay a higher tuition? If they live in these residences, they are effectively penalized $2,700. Why can't we honor these contracts, have them live off campus and not come onto campus? And maybe Annette, oh look, you're here, could take that one.
Annette has popped up, and Annette is willing to answer that question.
That is willing to answer that question. Thank you very much. It's a good question. We've been asked the same by our students. So the reality for us, and this probably touches on a couple of other questions, tuition does not translate to the content that you receive in the classroom. It actually translates to much more of a broad experience on campus. So when we think about the students who are living in private leases in our college owned off campus, in McCartney North or South, they are actually still needing some campus services that students who are living at home are not. So if you're living at home in Easton, we don't expect you to come to campus. You actually can't come to campus. You won't be subject to the initial testing, to the monitoring testing. You won't have access to our health services. You won't have access to our fitness center. You won't have access to the other campus resources. When we put out the information to students about requirements to come back, we really leaned heavily on the academic requirements and preferenced those seniors who have research, lab research, things that need to get done on this campus, which actually, again, translates to us to having to have a lot of infrastructure for the students who are on campus. You know, I'm sure that there are students who are saying, I won't come to campus, I'll just stay in my apartment. You know, or even students in private owned off campus have meal plans and are on campus and get mail and do other things. Really, I would say it's about the sort of the experience and the, although it's not gonna be the same experience they had last year for sure, but it's really about how we need to support those students for us that are here versus those students that are actually staying home with their parents, never coming to campus. It's just that it translates to that difference.
And maybe I would add something to that too, which is, you know, when we talked with FAP about setting the tuition price as we did, and the conscious decision to make it not a reduction for remote learning, but a reduction for not being on campus, it was in recognition of the fact that there are a lot of those expenses. And also it was a way of kind of reducing any pressure on the question of, is a class remote or not remote? That is, when we were anticipating a hybrid environment where some classes would be remote and others not, we wanted to ensure that students didn't feel like they should be getting a special discount just because one faculty member happened to choose to teach remote versus another. In the end, we do feel that this is actually a very fair representation of the fact that there are many aspects of the campus, you know, the campus experience that are not captured in room and board. Room and board is simply, you know, your bedroom and your food. There's a lot else that we offer on the campus that students will be getting. And we felt that it would be very implausible to imagine that we could restrict students from coming to campus and using services if they lived in the neighborhood. So we realize that people find that, you know, difficult, but I think it's important to remember that, you know, what we are saying is that the online courses are every bit as valuable as courses in person. What you're getting a reduction for, if you pay the stay-at-home fee, is the fact that you're not accessing campus services.
Annette, I'll ask you sort of batch some questions for you. The other question is why only 10%? So we're worried that is there damage?
It's not for Annette.
It's not for Annette.
I'll take that one. It sounds like we might have some parents as well as some staff and faculty in the audience. You know, the question of what sort of discount or reduction to offer, you know, is very much a judgment call. And as you may have noticed, there are plenty of colleges and universities that are offering no reduction for the fact that they're offering a different experience. We felt that it was very fair to acknowledge that the experience of being at home is not going to be the same as being on campus. At the same time, the expenses are not really reduced. Our largest expense is faculty and staff. Our largest expenses are investments in the buildings that are sitting here, whether we have large numbers of students in them or not. You know, as you all know from some of our previous budget discussions, there really isn't any reduction in cost to having fewer students on campus. And in fact, the extra health and safety precautions that we're taking have been an additional cost. So we felt that it was fair to acknowledge that, but it's important to remember the classes will be every bit as valuable. Students will be receiving the same credit they would for a class that they were sitting in the classroom, you know, to undertake. And so we don't feel there's any loss in the value of a Lafayette degree simply because this semester the courses are online. And so we don't feel that that anything more radical than the 10% reduction was needed.
And Annette, with students living in McCartney House, will they be able to get out of their contracts or other private leases?
So not other private leases. That's between the student and the landlord. Because of the special relationship with COCM and the college, students can contact COCM. They can ask to be released from that situation. We may elect to sign another student to that space for the fall semester, but they should contact COCM. When you sign a lease with a private landlord, meaning you're renting a house on Cattell Street, that's between the student and the individual. We are very clear with students when they do that's a private obligation they're making. So they can ask their landlord if they can be released. They can ask their landlord if they can sublet, but that is not something the college is involved with.
And two questions, Annette, on the health services. So will free flu shots be available as in previous years? And also, can you tell us a little about COVID testing for faculty and staff, and whether we should work through the college and when we should work through our own insurance/doctors?
Sure. So I believe, I don't know if Jeff is around somewhere, but I believe, yes, we would still have flu shots certainly for students and for faculty and staff who are around campus. We did arrange with the testing partner, we have the ability to get staff access to faculty and staff access to a test if we were planning on having students here in person. Given that we're not going to have classes in person, we can still move forward with that. If folks have symptoms, they should, of course, always contact their primary care provider first, because there's, a good reason to believe it may or may not be COVID, and your primary care provider is best situated to help you understand that. We will have rapid testing available on site. So if somebody, for whatever reason, was in the middle of the day somewhere and was like, gosh, I really don't feel good, we can work with them in the fall about that.
Annette, should we ask Leslie to comment on the question of insurance and whether
Sure.
insurance covers that? Leslie, can you comment on that?
Sure. Thanks, Allison. I'll just add to Annette's answer that for employees, we have been in touch with Capital Blue Cross and have arranged with them that if a physician, primary care provider, or Dr. Goldstein were to order testing, even for asymptomatic individuals who may have been exposed, that will be covered under our health insurance. So I'm pleased to be able to share that. Thanks, Allison. Of course, symptomatic testing is covered as well with no member share cost, but we've added asymptomatic testing to that as well under the circumstances where a physician orders it.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful.
We've got a question around MELT, so maybe if Greg is around, he could provide an update on MELT and how our students and families are reacting to our decision and how we've been doing this spring overall.
Happy to do that. Just remind everyone, it's only been 24 hours since this announcement has been made. Yesterday, we did receive 10 requests for deferral. Let's just remind everyone, a deferral is from a student, incoming first-year student. Upper year students may be requesting leaves of absences. Of course, those go through the college dean's office. I did see a few of those. I didn't see a total on that yesterday. But the 10 that we did receive was comparable to another Pennsylvania liberal arts college that announced their decision about a week ago to go remote only in the fall. The deadline to request a deferral is next week, so we'll have more to offer on that very shortly.
Thanks, Greg. All right, I got a couple questions for John Meyer, and Annette, so you can both stay on. So John, there's a bunch of questions around, and there are many around when will the fall semester start? Is it still August 17th? Are we looking to add any additional reading days back and or breaks now that we're going fully remote?
So thanks. I was invited to the meeting of the Curriculum and Educational Policy Committee that happened yesterday, and that was one of the primary topics of conversation in that committee. I would say that it continues to be the case that, particularly with the August 17th start date, our students have had to deal with a bunch of switches, and just from that perspective, the idea of switching once again the start date seemed problematic. And I'll also mention, as has already come up, there will be students who are in the residence hall, students who are living on College Hill. So a whole lot of the health and safety factors that led to our original decision to go with an August 17 date are still in play for those populations. So the August 17 day is staying. The Curriculum and Educational Policy Committee, I don't want to get out ahead of any decision making that they're making, but they were very much looking at the issue of, should we, for instance, restore fall break, maybe not the exact same days, but a fall break, have instruction continue through the Monday and Tuesday of Thanksgiving week, and have that be the adjustment. They also are very mindful of the fact that if we wait until the first faculty meeting, which is, I believe, August 18, the first currently scheduled faculty meeting, which is August 18, that's awfully late to be telling people about an adjustment to the calendar. So I guess I could, I hope I'm not throwing Larry and his colleagues under the bus here, but I would anticipate a communication about that from CEP relatively soon, because they are definitely working on that earnestly.
John, while you're here, and maybe Greg, if Greg needs to pop back on, can you talk a little bit about where we're where we're positioned on gap years and semesters, and is there a resource that faculty and staff can point students to if they get questioned on how to request a gap year and the implications on their status and financial aid?
Sure. I think you know, Greg will surely say a few more things. Also, gap years are always handled by class deans, even if they're referred to as a leave of absence, and that really is the place to start. We were in a meeting just this morning where we're working out a variety of the details that this moment arise that don't typically arise around issues like that. And so also there'll be greater detail in the FAQ. Frankly, I would say throughout the day, we will be adding additional detail related to that. Greg, do you have other things?
Yes, again, like defer requests coming from incoming first-year students. We've received about 12 gap year requests between May 1st and July 1st, which is really a normal year for us. The normal deadline to request a gap year for an incoming student is July 15th. This is anything, obviously, but a normal year. So we will open that up for a few more days, and but frankly, there's limited opportunities this year for gap years. So I'm not really expecting many more, but we will consider them on a case-by-case basis if need be.
Thank you. John, another question related to the academic world is, can you tell us the policy? I mean, will all the classes be recorded so that students in different time zones around the globe can access them?
Oh, that's a great question. It's actually, it's one that's in my inbox. So I hope that whoever sent me the email on this is listening. I would love to give a super crisp answer on this, but I think we're going to have to live with a certain sort of nuance and subtlety here. My best crisp answer is the faculty care deeply about our students, including international students and others who may be in wildly different time zones, and we'll be working hard to find ways that they can have a successful semester in every one of their courses. There are a variety of reasons why a person may not want to have recordings of class always available, or each and every class, or even some classes. So I wouldn't want to make a blanket statement that absolutely will happen with the folks who are in other time zones, but I know that is one of the methods that a lot of faculty members are considering to address this. We've also been working once again with CEP. We had a conversation a little bit about this yesterday. Kara Howe, the registrar. We do know that because of time zone issues that there are students, particularly students in Asia, where we need to prioritize during the add drop period, their ability to get into better timed courses as much as that is possible for them. It very much depends on their curriculum and what sort of options they have, but that's got to be a priority for us.
Thanks, John. Annette, there's a question here that Patty was writing in around the health center and providing scripts for faculty. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, that's why it pays to have the experts on the call, right? So Patty Martino clarified my previous answer. Faculty members can get a script for the test that they can go to Health Network Labs. Also, just, again, we in the Lehigh Valley, our testing situation is still better than certainly in the southern states. There are Rite Aid facilities. There are places you can walk in and get a test. You don't even need a prescription from your doctor. So that is also a possibility if folks are looking for like more frequent testing. But if you want that test before you're back in your office or your lab, then sure, the health center can provide you with that prescription and you can get that done.
Excellent. And there was a question in here, I'll have to find now, but it basically was asking, Annette mentioned the recreation center will be open. It would be important for faculty health after spending nearly all work hours for computers to be able to attend. Many cities can do so, regulated with registration and masks. Is that a possibility?
Well, we've prioritized the facilities for our students, and it's been open for the last week for students, and they've been signing up using a registration system. I won't say it's not a possibility, but I think we need to get a handle on what the student usage will look like first and make sure that we're able to kind of meet those needs. There is a significant reduction in equipment. There's a lot of space. It's really, 12, 15 folks an hour, I think, signing up to use the space. So it's not we have people pretty spread apart. Jody's been testing it. She'll keep evaluating it. And I'm sure that if you are one of those folks who uses the rec center and gets those emails from Jody, as we can change things or shift things, we will absolutely let you know.
Annette, just to confirm for the scripts, is that for faculty and staff?
Yes.
Excellent.
Of course.
Excellent. Let's see. Can John give an update on what the faculty have been doing over the summer to prep for remote learning? And how will this semester look different from the spring when they had less time to prep?
Well, that's a great question, and I imagine that something like half the people on this call who could probably give a far better answer on this than I, because that's exactly what they've been doing. Quick summary for those who haven't been living this. Since we came out in June with this announcement, I think everyone has had in their mind at least at the level of, we may have students that need to isolate. We may have students that can't get to campus. We may need to pivot in the middle of the semester and return to fully remote education. Things like exactly what we're doing right now were on people's radar, and that was part of the faculty's thinking as they were preparing for the fall semester. We've honestly got greater clarity now. We can have a higher degree of focus in terms of preparing for the fall classes, and I think that may be a little bit helpful too. In terms of some of the concrete things that have happened, there have been numerous workshops. There's been nuts and bolts workshops, right? Here's some of the new tech and how you use it. There's been deeper level pedagogical conversations going on. We had all of the conversation around Flower Darby's book on small teaching online. Siddles has had a number of other workshops related to that. The college writing program and Bianca Falbo also have been working with faculty about writing pedagogies in remote settings. So there's been an enormous amount of work. John O'Keefe can make some comments on the improved tech infrastructure that we've got that's going to be tremendously helpful. I think another thing that's going to be helpful is barring something far different than anything we're seeing right now. We do not expect the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to say that we need to vacate campus in the same way that we had to in the spring. And so faculty members are going to continue to have access to office space, laboratories, classrooms, maybe a limited number of classrooms to do their teaching from and have all those resources in hand. So we're really in much better shape than we had to when we had to make an emergency switch to remote instruction. And actually, I think we are going to do some awesome stuff. We're going to periodically be saying, the thing you think of as online education isn't going to be the remote education that Lafayette faculty members are engaged in, right? We're going to be teaching the sorts of classes where faculty members know their students, they're interacting with them, students are interacting with each other. There's going to be deep and rigorous learning going on. It's not the thing that we want to be doing. It's not the thing that we've done for decades, but I think we're going to do some really amazing things in the classroom this year.
Excellent, John. I've got two other questions for you. I think they're related. One is from a faculty member who's saying, since the deadline for deferrals and leave of absence is soon, it seems important to contact our students soon so they can have an idea about our courses. What are some of the main concerns you've heard? Those would be helpful to hear so they can address any common problems. And I'll tack onto that another question that's related. So will there be a mechanism for students or families who are experiencing academic issues, lack of class time, only handouts, inflexibility, and maybe even tuck in the grading policy? Would we be looking at any different grading policies this semester?
So as you all can tell, CEP has got a huge amount on their plate. I'm going to take the grading policy first. That was another discussion that they had in the meeting. It was a very earnest discussion. It was looking at a variety of things. I think at the moment we're going to have to wait for them to continue to analyze that situation quite carefully. The advice that they rendered in the middle of the true emergency in the spring semester was a spring semester only policy. So at the moment we have the same policy that we normally have, but they are looking very seriously at that. In terms of contacting students and some of the questions they have, goodness, everybody should be contacting students, faculty, staff, anyone you've got a connection with. They have got a ton of questions right now, and the more outreach that we can provide to them in this moment, the better. The more clarity about what you know about the course that you're teaching and how that's going to function, the better. I know that not all the answers are going to be available at this moment because we're still working on that. We're still doing design of what exactly this is going to mean, but the more that folks get to hear from us, that's just a, you know, Allison brought up the issue of communication before and how hard communication is. Faculty members know they are working really hard on their courses, but not every student who's enrolled in your course knows that you're working really hard on your courses. And so that outreach is great. In terms of particular questions, the overwhelming number of things that I have bumped into, either by summaries of some of the phone bank calls that we had or from my particular inbox, has to do with, can you assure me that there's going to be real engagement and interaction between me and the faculty member, or between me and other students in the class? I know that's a thing that everybody's working on, but addressing that, that level of engagement and interactivity, that would be a great thing that faculty members could pass along to their students. And then there are all of the studio-based courses, for instance, in music and art, and the laboratory experiences. That is another huge set of questions. And I've been involved in a handful of conversations with faculty colleagues on that too. And everybody gets it. It's thinking hard about what are the learning outcomes in those situations and how can we meaningfully get to those learning outcomes. A lot of this does involve learning through tactile interactions with things. You can get at that with things like Lab from Home or the studio artists sending out materials that are safe for people to use all by themselves or at least remotely. The engineers and the laboratory scientists have been doing similar things. There are actually also a lot of really good simulation software out there that's a great way to generate some insights into what is going on. A large part of the experience on the lab side has to do with data analysis. There's a lot of data analysis that similarly can go on. So we can get at a lot of those learning goals without some of the wonderful facilities that we have on campus. It's not as good. I'm never going to try and claim that it's absolutely as good, but it's still going to be impactful, and it's still going to be addressing the things that those experiences need to address.
Thanks, John. Somewhere in there, you said the word communication, so I'm just going to parlay it into my own conversation around communication. And before I say that, I know that there's some parents on this call, and I deeply appreciate you guys logging in, because the parent town hall, we just hit our Zoom cap of 1,000 people. And so what we will do is record that webinar for you this afternoon, and then immediately post it on the family site, hopefully by 5 o'clock this afternoon, assuming we can do that. Shouldn't be a problem to do. And I'm also capturing your questions that are in the chat that are related specifically to student needs, and we will ask them at the town hall or get to those questions there specifically. But I know that you all want to hear about that, and we're also looking at whether or not we'll host a second town hall for families soon thereafter, and we'll let you know about that. But turning back to the faculty and staff and sort of this decision, Allison, is there a reason why the decision did not to go remote did not go to the faculty first? Yeah, that's my question.
Sure, and a couple of people have asked that, and it's an excellent question. I think you could probably tell if you are on social media at all that the communications got out a little bit ahead of us, and we did not roll this out as smoothly as we would have if the rumor mill had not gotten so active. So I do recognize it would have been good to give faculty a heads up and apologize for the fact that because both rumors were starting on Monday and Tuesday, and then students who are of course always smarter than we forget how smart they are, thought of checking the website to see if there were any updates even before, minutes before we had put the notice out. We really did feel like we had to rush to get the information out because so many people were calling and asking about it. We needed to get it to everyone simultaneously, and so I apologize if that put faculty in a difficult position. It would have been good to send a notice to you ahead of time, and the note that John and Leslie sent afterwards to faculty and staff, kind of acknowledging, the kind of primacy of faculty and staff in their relationship to this issue, was meant in some ways to kind of compensate for that. So I agree that that was not done as smoothly as it might have been. And it shows the high level of interest in this topic that there was plenty of commentary even before any kind of formal announcement went out. People were very eager to know. And again, recognizing how difficult this decision has been for many, we do hope that having at least certainty about it rather than uncertainty about it will be helpful.
Maybe I'll ask Leslie to turn on her camera and maybe Annette and talk a little bit about two things. One is our how we're thinking about bringing faculty and staff back to campus, specifically our staff, and how we're thinking about bringing them back. And then if you could all talk maybe about, there's a question here, so would the recent change have an impact on the Early Learning Center's ability to open, and any other information about supporting staff and faculty with childcare needs?
Annette, would you like me to take a shot at that first?
Yes, please.
Okay. In terms of return to campus for staff members, we are staying with the plan that we had in place since June with respect to those who would be coming back to campus in person and those who would be continuing to work remotely. So if you were scheduled to come back to campus for the August 17th in-person on-campus experience, please continue to stay with that plan. And if you were scheduled to remain working remotely, continue to plan to work remotely. As you know, the Commonwealth last week issued additional guidance, and while we're still in green, the governor is encouraging and guiding us that anyone who can continue to possibly work remotely should do so. So within the next week to 10 days, the division heads and supervisors will be reviewing those plans to see if any changes should be made. But for the time being, if you were scheduled to remain remote, remain remote. If you were scheduled to come to campus, stay with that plan. And if you have any questions, please ask your supervisor.
And I think you didn't get the Early Learning Center, and I know Roger isn't here, but
I can comment on that as well. I think Melissa's on the call. She could add to anything I may miss, but I was told as of this morning that the Early Learning Center will be reopening in early August, and more information regarding that will be forthcoming, but that's the best information I have at this point. I'm not sure of the exact date. I think it may be August 3rd, but we will verify that.
And Melissa, if you would talk a little bit about the work that you're doing, following up on a meeting that we had with some faculty and staff about childcare needs more broadly.
Sure. So our understanding at this point is the Early Learning Center will be open on August 3rd. And as you know, as faculty and staff of the college, that's something that if people are interested, you can follow up with them. We'll also be reaching out just to clarify information and be able to post that online and share as well. Since I've gotten involved just with how we can be better supporting caregivers on campus, I've had contact with both HR on a few different occasions over the past week and a half, as well as the provost's office. So there were some different concerns that were brought to us and suggestions. So we're working through them. I'm reaching back out to a small group that did bring some different thoughts and ideas to us just to talk through them a little bit more. We hope to have some more immediate kind of access points of resources up early next week online. And then we are also looking at some different partners that we might be able to provide additional support, not just to the child care, but maybe people that are involved with elder care or other care needs that are going to come into play now that we're going to be in a remote learning environment. So in the next 1 to 2 weeks, we hope to have more information out, but we will be sure to share that on Lafayette Today and have different conversations on campus and maybe even a little town hall with caregivers just to be able to share that information and get some additional feedback as well. And if you have suggestions, feel free to give me a call.
If I can just slide one more thing in there, because I think it's in a couple of other questions and it relates to the comments about, who is on campus and who is not necessarily. We are bringing back more students certainly than we had here in the fall or in the spring. In the spring, we had just over 200 students. We think, obviously we haven't received all the requests yet. Our best guess is that number between the students who are in private off-campus and off-campus housing and our on-campus might be around 800. So several times the size of the number that we had in the spring, but still significantly lower than our general occupancy. These are largely, again, students who are involved in senior research, thesis, projects. They're living basically independently, which does change. And then some students in our residence halls who need additional academic support or other support. These are largely students who are living independently, as I said, for the most part, but we'll have staff who need to, obviously provide support for students. So certainly in the campus life realm, folks have been told different information about when they need to be on campus and what they should be doing. So, again, to follow up on Leslie's point, you would be working with your supervisor, but our expectation is the campus is still fairly minimally populated. To get in your head, that's not that many more students than we typically have here over interim or another period. So if you can think about, what the campus generally looks like during one of those time periods, that's about the number of students we expect to have at the end of the process.
Ned and Leslie, there's questions as I work in an open office with others who are a little more carefree about COVID. Can I request my immediate area coworkers be tested? And I will also parlay that with what should we do, or what should staff and faculty do if they feel that our own social distancing norms and all safety procedures are not being followed by students and or fellow faculty or staff?
I'll start by saying that if you are scheduled to come back to work or you need to be in your workspace, that it's important that you feel comfortable. And so obviously each office space is in touch with facilities and other folks on Annette's team to make sure that those protocols and provisions are in place. If you have concerns, and Annette probably can touch on the other aspects of the cleaning protocols, but if you have concerns, there are a set of FAQs on the HR website about what to do with regard to various circumstances or concerns. If you have concerns about fellow workers not following the proper protocols, you should please be in contact with HR and we will handle that. If you have concerns due to your own health circumstances that need particular attention, you can be in touch with HR as well, and we'll be glad to try to assist with that.
So I'll add the other piece, which is, if you have concerns about students who are not following the guidance that we have set up. So we did, when we contacted students and asked them if they wanted to think about coming back to campus, that they should tell us what their needs were. We included in that a list, an addendum to our student handbook that is sort of a COVID addendum of rules to follow. And, uncharacteristically for us, we actually specified the sanction for not following would be to be suspended, which is clear, but I think it underscores the public health issue for us. We don't want students to be gathering in groups, to be having large events, to be doing the sorts of things that we have seen on the news and other places. We've talked about certain categories of students needing access to campus for their academic progress, for their research, for other things. And we want to try to accommodate that. But in order to do that, everybody has to agree to the rules. So students got a copy, they'll be asked to sign a copy. We will have folks kind of moving through the community to try to help monitor that, if you will, not police it, but sort of monitor and be sure that students are aware that they need to be doing certain things. But if you have a concern, there is an email address that is on our FAQ page that you can email. You can also fill out a one-part. There's a special COVID one-part designation now for things that you see that are things that we need to follow up with students.
Related to that, Annette, is there a policy in place regarding visitors to campus? And I would say we also had some students who will choose to study, coming from a parent, but get some students who talked yesterday about choosing the study from home option and then still wanting their student and or the student to come to campus and use facilities. Can you discuss our general philosophy on visitors and that piece?
Yeah, I mean, so that gets back again to the sort of the difference in the tuition rates and things like that. If students are studying from home, they are expected to be at home and not to come to campus. And we have told students who are staying here on campus that you can't have your friends come visit you over the weekend or things like that. That is, I think, where colleges run into problems. For the most part in the spring, which was a slightly different environment because the entire country was sort of in a lockdown situation. For the most part, students largely obeyed that sort of regulation, although there were some instances where students came back, and certainly in private off-campus, there were some instances where students had some events and things that we needed to follow up on. I know the sanction of considering suspension for something seems harsh. But the concept is, if we don't actually set something up where it is very clear that students who are not supposed to be here, so we haven't given permission to be on campus, can't be here, it creates a challenge. And if we were to allow students to come to campus who weren't going to be here, then I think the question comes back again to, why would you charge students who are here a different tuition rate if other students could just drive to campus and have the same access and not be paying that rate? So it is something that we have discussed. We told students they can't have visitors of any kind. Do I think 100% of them will follow that rule? No, but we will then have to follow up with them and use our discipline process there.
Thank you. I'm going to bring our provost back to the stage. I've got two questions for him. The first one we'll start is, John, what effect, if any, will this pivot have for tenure and promotion cases?
So there's lots of ways to interpret that. I would say anyone who's scheduled for tenure or promotion review next year, I don't anticipate there's any change for that group. So if that was part of where this was coming from, I'll toss that out. I suspect it has more to do with we did have well, I guess we still have a COVID catastrophe option that pre-tenure faculty members could raise their hand for because of the impact that COVID had, as we had an emergency pivot in the spring semester. So we haven't had conversations about what maybe another COVID catastrophe option might look like. I do think I've been in a number of conversations with individuals, not with committees. There is a tension there. We, like all of higher education, have a pretty long run before a tenure decision. It's a long time to wait. So I think there is the flip side of, can we help reset the faculty's understanding and expectations of what a great tenure file would look like for people who are working through this in this particular moment. So I don't have a crisp answer on that. Yeah, I don't have a crisp answer on that.
And then let's see if you can make Kara kind of curl up in a ball here. When will the final class lists be known and be available to the faculty? And also a question about how will students be able to start changing actually their classes or their schedule if things have been different? How will that work?
Great. So the second one's easier for me. The first one, I do know that if you go into Banner, and I understand a huge number of students in particular have been going into Banner already. There's a lot of students in classes right now. I'm trying to look to see if Kara's in a panic trying to text me the answer to this question, but I'm not finding it. I think we've got awfully good information on that right now. If they're not finalized, then it's going to be in the incredibly near future. So I guess I could search if Kara's on the call. We'll send out information to the faculty on where we are on that. Prior to this announcement, CEP and the registrar's office had been already thinking about an online add drop process, because the idea of a bunch of students with a bunch of slips of paper walking around campus getting signatures really did not seem like an optimal way to do add drop during this upcoming fall semester. And now, of course, it just isn't going to work at all. There will be an online add drop process for courses through Banner. It will open up shortly before the semester starts, and it'll go through, I believe, the first week. Don't trust me on that, but I believe I've got the correct memory, through the first week of classes. The students will, just like when they're choosing their courses, be able to select into courses that have space. And Kara is working with heads and chairs on the select number of courses for which we really do need there to be sort of a departmental level oversight about who's going into what classes. I guess going back to my home department, an example there would be, you don't want the student adding themselves into the wrong sort of calculus class that wouldn't fit the background they've got and their goals for their academic career.
Thanks, John. One last one related to tenure. Will the faculty starting this fall be able to exercise the COVID catastrophe option?
So I believe the deadline, it's starting this fall.
Yes.
That has not been discussed.
Thank you. There's a question for Allison. Were the city officials informed about our decisions, and did we have any reactions from the city or the Easton?
Sure. You know, I was in contact with Sal Panto, the mayor of Easton, shortly before our announcement went out earlier that morning. Had a text exchange with him and then a follow-up email. And you know, he was sorry to hear that that we had to move in this direction. Extremely, you know, sympathetic and supportive. As you can imagine, the city of Easton, as they think about their businesses coming back, would prefer to have more people around rather than fewer, although he had always understood that our plans for, you know, kind of social distancing would mean we would be discouraging students from, you know, spending a lot of time wandering around off campus. But, you know, so I think everyone was prepared for the idea that there would be less activity, even, you know, when the restaurants are back to, you know, to kind of fuller operations. But he was, you know, they certainly are facing their own challenges, and they recognize that, of course, since we are, you know, a significant employer, a significant taxpayer, they always want to see Lafayette College do well. So, you know, they were just very supportive of, you know, anything that the college needs to do in order to, you know, to support college operations. Melissa, is there anything you would add? I know you were in touch with the county executive and a couple of other folks and College Hill neighbors as well.
Sure. No, I think just the biggest concern is that people really enjoy having our students on campus and the vibrancy that our events and having our students back in the community bring, and from an economic vitality perspective. So really, I think businesses are struggling now, and not having our students back on campus, you know, it's going to dampen things. But that's where I would encourage all of us to continue to do curbside and takeout or dine outdoors, and just be present. And we will have students still on campus that hopefully, you know, they'll make their way to the downtown safely and follow masking guidelines and so on. But it's all of us too that will help keep our city strong. So make sure you get out there and support the different Easton businesses that we have.
Great.
If I could leap in, it turns out Kara is listening, and class lists are currently available in Banner self-service.
Great.
Alice, I'd like to turn at some point to what we're going to do in the spring, but there still are a couple of questions out there around, you know, the recognition that we are not going to have as many students back on campus and what that means for our staff. Specifically, what are the plans for trades and maintenance custodians, since only 10% of the students are returning? And again, maybe just talking a little bit how we're thinking, how we are not actually at this moment thinking about furloughs, but how our finances will impact that in our enrollment.
Sure, and it sounds like maybe there are a couple of different questions with different angles, but, you know, I'll repeat, and it's possible that some people have come in later, but it also bears repeating. You know, we haven't yet made any plans that would include furloughs, but I can't rule that out. You know, we'll have to look carefully at what our staffing needs are. I think one of the things we recognize is that even having a smaller number of students on campus, if buildings are open, they still will need to be cleaned. They still will need to be maintained. You know, it's hard to assess immediately what reduction of impact there might be, you know, given the lower population in some of those areas. I know from talking to our colleagues at Bon Appetit yesterday, Chris Brown and Chef John, you know, they recognize the impact on dining services, obviously, of having fewer students here, and are very supportive of this direction, but that's going to have an impact on their operations as well. And so we have not yet had a chance to really map out any particular plans for specific areas of the college. I'll ask Leslie if there's anything that you can add that I'm not aware of.
No, I think you captured it exactly. For our immediate plan, we, as I said, will be bringing back staff that are intended to be on campus, and those who are scheduled to work remotely will continue to work remotely. But as Allison says, we will see how the situation evolves in terms of what our staffing needs turn out to be, and we'll continue to monitor that. And as Allison said, we'll have to make adjustments if adjustments are called for.
So, I mean, I'll have Annette come back as well, and Allison, you can toss a coin of who wants to go first, but how are we thinking about the spring? What things need to happen both nationally and at Lafayette College for students to be on campus in full for the spring semester?
Wow, I wish I knew more about the spring semester than that spring comes after fall. That I do know. Other than that, I could not say a lot about the spring, except that an important component of our decision making was the recognition that if we have a stable and successful fall, that would position us better for spring. You know, I think we all recognize there's been some slightly more optimistic, you know, news on the vaccine front. There are improved therapies that, you know, might improve treatment of COVID. There are lots of things, you know, that are the more hopeful signs, in addition to what we've called the more negative signs reasons, that impacted our decision to be remote in the fall. And so I think that one of the advantages of what we'll be planning this fall is that it'll give us the opportunity to test our campus systems and see how they work for the limited population we have here. And so it may very well be that we would feel better prepared to welcome a full component of students or full component of students back, even if there are still some challenges in the external environment. It is difficult to know. A lot depends on how different states are managing things. Some states obviously have done a better job of managing things than others, and some of that may correct itself over the course of the next few months, and that also would give us a little more confidence if we saw a flattening of the curve in places that currently are hotspots. Annette, what would you say on this?
Yeah, I think all that I would add is to say it is an overlay of various factors. There's no one particular factor that you look at and say, oh, that's the issue. We had a real confluence of events that you highlighted really well earlier, so I won't go through them again. Nationally, of course, what we would love to see is continued progress on both treatments, increased and very robust testing capacity. I do not expect, even in my most optimistic world, that we would have access to a vaccine, in this year. But those kinds of things, you want to see progress being made there. And of course, the disease kind of leveling off in places is pretty important to us. But as Allison pointed out, I think the most important thing, we were very optimistic after the spring, and we had those 200 or 250 students on campus, even at the height of when the disease was kind of raging through Northampton and Lehigh counties. Our students, now that doesn't say none of them ever got COVID, but none of them ended up, symptomatic in our care that were here. So we were pretty optimistic that we could manage with a larger group. This group that we'll have will be 3 to 4 times larger than that, and I think that will give us insights as to where things might still need more tightening and what works really well and what doesn't. And there has been one major improvement that I would say just in the last week, and that's that the FDA gave approval for pooled testing, which is something that colleges have been very interested in because it allows you to eliminate an entire residence hall floor or a space by using only one set of the reagent, which is really important in kind of monitoring testing strategies. So that's good news. If I can slip in here, because I love to say when I'm wrong, I got a text that I said something wrong earlier, so let me just correct. The form, if you have a concern about a student, is not actually part of one part. It is on the conduct website, and so you can access it there. It's just through a Maxent form.
Very good.
There is a question around, will the decision for our start date be brought to the faculty for a vote, or is the decision to start on the 17th final?
John, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. So the start date on the 17th isn't a change. So that isn't a thing that would come to the faculty. I presume that, I don't presume, if CEP does want to bring forward a possibility for a change in the fall calendar or any other calendar, that would be something that would be brought for a faculty vote.
Could I add something there, John, which is to reiterate 2 points made earlier. One is that many international students have already booked flights in the expectation that August 17th is when things would start. And, people have already rearranged their schedules once around that date. It's also the case that having a little more time, a little more runway before the end of the semester may be helpful in considering a suggestion that was made by FAP. I don't know, John, if CEP had time to consider a suggestion that was made that we consider inserting a couple of short breaks in the course of the semester. Again, given that travel isn't a problem, there's no reason why you can't have breaks. And in fact, given given the intensity of online teaching and learning, for both faculty and students, would CEP want to consider a tweak to the calendar that would put a couple of long weekends or something in there where there'd be class break time? Even at home, people might appreciate having a couple of days of additional, preparation time or rest time. So those would be things that could be considered within the structure of the current calendar.
And then for John, another one, and I imagine we really need Jennifer Kelly here, but how are students in the performing arts going to have the same experience online as they would in person?
Oh goodness, yeah. We would need Jennifer Kelly and the faculty members to give the reasonable level of detail on that one, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Well, I will say, Allison, if you want to provide some last comments, I think we've answered most of the questions that are in the chat at the moment.
Sure. Well, I guess I would end by saying I know that some of the questions that are out there are things that we can't answer. I wish I could give a state with certainty what will happen and what won't happen. You know, will there be further impacts on compensation or on staffing? I hope not. I began by saying, and I continue to say, I feel optimistic about where we are relative to what our initial projections were, the steps we've already taken. But I'm not in a position to make any guarantees when we haven't even seen fall enrollment and we haven't seen how things play out. And so, you know, I ask the community's, you know, patience in recognizing that this is a situation that really is evolving so rapidly and that has so many moving pieces that we're trying very, very hard to keep people well informed as best we can. And as I acknowledged earlier, sometimes we slip up and we can't keep up with the pace of things, as was the case with our announcement yesterday. And so, you know, I do apologize for the moments when that gets a little bit beyond us, but we really welcome everybody's thoughts about other sort of channels of communication that we can use to try and keep people in the loop. One of the things that is challenging in that regard is recognizing that there are, you know, moments where things are being talked about, moments when things are decided, moments when things are announced, and we try and involve all the appropriate governance groups in the right places in those chains. We also try and give the community a sense of what's happening as it's happening, and I think that in the latter regard we could probably do more, and we'll continue to do that. I guess I would close by noting again that this has been such a difficult time for our community, and I'm very proud of the strength and the resolution that people have brought to these challenges, and you know, wish that we could make it easier for everyone than it currently is. But we certainly understand that at this moment when we're all, you know, making this pivot in this new direction, the one positive that I think we can take out of it is that there is more certainty than uncertainty. There should be some reduction in anxiety in knowing where we're headed and having a clear path forward. And I think really the strength of our community is what's going to help us and hold us together. It's harder to hold the community together in these circumstances, but I know a lot of good thinking is already going into ways in which we can do that better and do that more. It's the thing in the end that will bring our students back and keep them tied to Lafayette as well. The more they can feel that from you, feel that sense of connection, feel that sense of community that we have with each other and that we have with our students, I think the stronger we'll be. So thank you all for your hard work. Thanks everyone for taking the time to be with us today, and have a good rest of the day.